Barcelona-based De Antonio Yachts has been gaining tremendous traction over the last few years for its unique approach to the kind of hybrid powerboat that brings together proper day boating credentials with serious cruising accommodation. We've seen some excellent platforms lower down the range, and here at the Cannes Yachting Festival they're introducing a new flagship to that fleet, the De Antonio D60. Now, when you take a set of design principles that works very well on small boats, that doesn't always translate onto larger platforms very effectively. So we'll see how it performs here, but certainly the key elements of the De Antonio design are all here. We got that plumb bow, a beam forward sort of design before it tapers in there, and as you can see, if I move the camera to the side, we've got really vertical hull size just to maximise that internal volume for the cruising element of the mix. But if we move further aft, arguably the most De Antonio element of the De Antonio design is the propulsion. Because even on this 60-footer, like on the smaller boats in the range, what it's doing is using outboard engines instead of inboard engines. So those outboard engines are hidden beneath this aft sun pad, enabling you to extend the day spaces way aft of that. Really get much more joy for your day boating fun out of a limited length of platform. But here, of course, because it's a 60-footer, they've had to ramp up that power. So what we have in here, if I just jump on board and poke the camera in, you'll see we've got a quad rig here, a quad rig of 600 horsepower V12s, which apparently will push this 60-footer to around about 48 knots, and that really is quite something. That solution is not completely without compromise, because the fact that we've got this structure built aft of those engines, after the transom, it comes a decent way after the transom in fact, means you've got additional weight at the back end. So to compensate for that, in tandem with the design principles of the smaller boats, we have kind of hull extensions, almost in the form of a catamaran style design, just to add a bit of extra aft buoyancy. And underway, certainly the smaller boats tended to run very flat on account of that buoyancy aft. So we'll have to see how this boat performs. But certainly in terms of the spaces further forward, it does very good things. On this particular boat, we've got a lovely big sunbed, nice built-in backrests and a bit of lateral support as well. And in the centre there, a trough for your champagne and a table. Plenty of space beneath there for storage, as you'd expect. And further forward, an external dinette in that aft cockpit. If we move around to the starboard side and head forward, it's a symmetrical design. We'll let this gent come out of the way first. It's a symmetrical design, so a central wheelhouse, up a single step. We've got doors, as you can see, on both sides of this superstructure. And when we reach the bow, this is a pretty cool place to be. Kind of adopts the design principles of much larger power boats. As I say, we've got a beam forward design here, so loads of space to play with, a pair of tables, a U-shaped forward facing settee, and a sliding backrest on the forward sunbed, so you can turn that into aft facing settees and have a really sociable sort of zone while retaining a little bit of seating forward. But as I say, these De Antonios give you lots of day space, so that's not the end of it. If we just stand up on this seat and peer over the top of the roof structure, you'll see we've got a set of sunbeds built into that roof with access directly from the saloon. So there's certainly no shortage of places to take a seat, have a glass of wine or a meal. And actually, while we're talking of the day spaces, before we pop into the saloon itself, it's worth mentioning that this platform at the aft end has a central section that lifts over and down into the water, so you can drop it subsurface and use it as a kind of hub for your water sports. Storage is really well taken care of too inside this unit. If we lift that up, we've got a nice broad tray, relatively deep too. You fit plenty of bits and bobs in there. And then if you lift that platform up as well. Beneath there you get direct access to those quad 600s. If we move up and forward a little, well, as you'd expect, as an outboard powered boat, and a pretty substantial one at that, there's enormous space beneath the deck where you might expect inboard engines to go. Absolutely vast. I don't think I've seen a storage cavity of this kind of volume on any boat at this kind of length. And you can put pretty much anything in there. Really tailor this boat to the way you like to go boating. As for the saloon space itself, well, if you pop in at the aft end, I think you're likely to be pretty impressed with that. Sorry, I'm chasing these fellas around. In we come. It's a single level threshold between the two spaces, a couple of sliding doors. And at this lower level we have inward facing benches and a table that folds out. Plenty of space there. It's very relaxed, quite low level, quite lounge style. And on both sides these windows also drop down into those mouldings just to give you a sense of the open boating feel even inside. And up above us, this sunroof that slides out of the way, and you can basically use these bookshelves to climb up and out and access those sunbeds on the roof that we looked at from the bow. It's a very neat design. And if we go up one more step, well, as you can see, we've got quite a dramatic central helm station, big enough for 3 people, and that's open on both sides to the lower deck, distanced from that one-piece screen. So visibility is really very good indeed. But actually, before we get into the helm station, I should mention that even though this is quite a cool design, this bookshelf to get up and out onto the rooftop, well, the gap for your fingers between the frame and the wood is a bit tight, and it is of course vertical, so it's not a job that can be done necessarily that easily by the elderly and the infirm. If you want to go up and sunbathe on the roof, it's probably a young man's sport. In any case, behind those 3 helm seats we have what appears to be a wet bar, but actually isn't. It's a unit that contains the TV at quite a low level, so you can watch it from either of these benches in this aft lounge. And above that, a little sink. And you look at that and think, well, there's not much to it. There isn't, but it is supplemented, of course, by a galley down in here that can be kind of cordoned off if you choose to use crew on this boat. So it's not a problem at all. It's certainly a feature worth having if you're enjoying drinks back here or nibbles back here in the aft lounge. As you can see, we're on our way out for a drive now, but while we're waiting to get out to sea, let's just pop down below and take a look at those cabins, because as I say, ahead of the helm, that central helm, we've got a kind of open atrium with tremendous height. Lots of light from those screens, that one-piece screen, and side windows. Up a couple of steps, here's the galley that we saw from the saloon. Very well equipped, and as I say, you can cordon it off for use by crew should you choose. But if you look forward, what we have up here, I was going to say in the V of the bow, as you can see, it's very squared off, down a little step. Nice proportions. If I step inside, point the camera at the mirror, you'll see the kind of headroom we're working with here. I have to actually stretch my arm to reach the deck head. The deck head does dip a bit over the bed, but that's no problem at all, because even if I walk under that, there's still plenty of room for a 6-footer. What we have is quite simple, but very attractive. Not a great deal of cabinetry. We've got a pair of settees, one on either side, which is arguably a bit too much for a 2-person cabin. A central bed with bedside tables on both sides. Plenty of room, even as the deck head dips again for sitting up in bed, taking it easy. Quite low level windows there, but they are a decent sort of height from bed level for you to see the horizon. And we've got plenty of mirrored surfaces here as well. I'd assume that's a cupboard door, and it is. Plenty of hanging storage there. And the same on the other side. And sliding doors, of course, so that we can make very best use of space. We don't have to waste space with the arc of a regular door. And if we look to the starboard side, well, here is the day heads in a very good position actually at the bottom of these steps from the saloon for easy access from the guests. But it does have a separate shower compartment with a rain shower and with space for a little teak seat. It's very elegantly put together, that. An additional unit there, and if I swing that door, shut and open this forward one, you'll see that there's a separate toilet, which is particularly private and particularly practical. I quite like the fact that we've got a kind of soft touch. It's almost soft touch, it's kind of a matte finish to the wall. It's a nice contrast from the wood. Now let's open that out and head further aft, down a couple of steps and down another step again to the owner's cabin. But before we get there, here on the port side, well, people are going to love this. If you're into your cruising, you want to stay away for a decent spell. A proper walk-in wardrobe. A really tremendous feature on a boat of this scale. And if we step down into the cabin itself, well, as you can see, it's full beam. Again, a central bed facing forward. A settee on the starboard side. But this time we have something rather different on the port side. We've got a desk here, good bit of storage. Again, very, very decent windows indeed. Plenty of mirrors to help bounce that light around. And even at the lower section of deckhead, again we've got, I'd say, maybe 6'3" of headroom in there. So the proportions here are very attractive. If we open up this door to the starboard side, here is our ensuite. A pretty generous footprint, that. Very much like the walk-in wardrobe on the other side, with the toilet aft. Sink forward of that, and a really lovely big rain shower for you and your partner. Plenty of space for two people in there. Clearly then, it does provide that kind of combination of day boating space and cruising credentials that we've seen from smaller De Antonios in the past. But of course, as you'd expect, there's also the potential to add a third cabin simply by dividing this bow cabin in half for a double on either side. Well, we're out on the water on the D60 now. There's not much of a sea state to play with, maybe a 4-3 and sort of 2 footers, a little bit of chop, nothing much. Got 10 people on board, so we're relatively heavily loaded, but we've had a little play with this, and we've got up to 46.5 knots with these quad rig of 600s, and they tell me that they've actually had 48.2 when it's more lightly loaded. But as anticipated, this helm station is a bit of a treat. I love being bang in the centre of the boat. I like being distanced from that screen. I like the fact that that screen is kind of vertical on one piece, and we've got nice big side windows as well, plus side doors. So visibility is fantastic, and I feel pretty confident about actually conducting a bit of seamanship manoeuvres with this on my own if I was single-handed. There's very easy access to those side decks, easy access to the cleats. And what we have here, I mean, the dash itself is pretty pared back. We've got a couple of 19-inch plotters there, a little bit of basic switch gear, the compass directly in my eye line, which I like very much. It's amazing how often designers fail to actually achieve that, even though it's a very simple thing. And the touch points all feel very naturally to hand when you kind of prop yourself up with these integrated bolsters. But of course, what we want to do is get underway. So we'll do that right now. As I say, we've got a quad rig of 600 horsepower V12s here, and as I've also mentioned, in the De Antonio fashion, we have that structure going aft of those outboards, and in order to compensate for that, we've got the hull extensions on either side, and on smaller models in the range, that kind of pins the nose, and it's pretty much the same here. If I get her up and underway, well, you'll see first up that the transition to the plane is very, very flat. There's almost no bow lift at all as we push on through, and you can do that relatively fast. We're already doing 24 knots, and I'm being quite ginger with these throttles at the outset. Well, we stay nice and flat, and if I trim her out a little just to try to elevate that nose, we get a little bit, but not a huge amount. It does kind of plough the bow through those seas a little bit, so I'd anticipate in the following sea, not that we have one to play with here today, it might be a little bit wet and it might steer a little bit by the bow, particularly because we don't have much in the way of splash direction. There's not a lot of bow flare on this hull. We saw it from the pontoon, relatively steep hull size, but of course that does great things for the volume in terms of accommodation, and actually for most sea states a very flat running attitude is perfectly acceptable. Now, this particular boat is owned by Carloz Sainz. We'll aim to beat him in the driving stakes. We'll throw her around a little bit. as we heel over to starboard. There's a decent bit of heel here, just enough that as you're stooping down to peer out that skipper's side door, and there's a good bit of grip, just a little bit of slip to temper that, so it's by no means an intimidating boat to drive. And if we swing them right round to port, again, good heel, but decent visibility. Nice and secure, of course, because all the while we got plenty of hull in the water. Now, if we just settle it down, we'll talk briefly about the efficiency figures, because they're quite good. At everything between 22 and 35 knots, we're seeing about 12 litres per mile. Now, we've got triple tanks here, totaling about 3,800 litres to keep the weight where it ought to be. So if we save 20% in reserve, that's 3,000 litres to play with. So a range right throughout that very broad cruising band of around about 250 miles. So for a boat that can do 48 knots, sleep a whole bunch of people, gives you all kinds of day boating flexibility in terms of your socialising zones, and that's a pretty good cruising return, I reckon. That then is the new Antonio D60, the new flagship of the Antonio fleet, and it very much feels that way. And certainly you could argue that the space ahead of the helm, that lovely double height bright space, well, it could be better used for other things, but it feels like a bit of a luxury in its own right. And you could also suggest, as you could for the smaller Antonios, that that flat running attitude is not that useful for a following sea. But for most people, in most conditions, if you've got the budget and you're looking at around about the 60-foot mark, this boat's capacity to combine proper cruising credentials with proper day boating ability and plenty of performance on the water makes it a real contender. Whether you agree with that or not, we'd love to hear from you, so please do leave your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this in the future, please do subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.